Hi, I'm Jam Supernova and this is how I DJ. Yeah, I think I do remember the first sort of time I thought I could actually mix. I basically spent a long time mixing the same two records, and I think it was just like a house record. I can't even remember which house record it was, but I know that that's all I did for about 3 months, is try and mix these two records. And then when it finally did it, I was like, right, what's next? I think my influences kind of initially were the people that were around me. So I definitely say Madam X was one, because she was doing quite a lot ahead of me. I think Barely Legal again, she was one. And then kind of like the DJs that I got to watch and be inspired by were the ones that I was working with. So I was working behind the scenes at 1Xtra. So I was like getting to sit in the studio and watch Target on his Friday Night Live show and just see him, jumping from hip hop to drum and bass. And the same with someone like Toddler. I got to work closely with him and spend a lot of time watching him DJ. And Semtex as well, he's like a completely different DJ. He was straight up hip hop. So being able to watch those two, or those three, I think were really valuable for me. So one technique that I like to use, I use a lot of loops. Anyone that goes back to back with me gets quite annoyed, because I'm basically I loop everything, and I like to in record blocks set up the loop sometimes pre-made. So if I've been practicing during the day and I think that would be a great loop, then I'll make the loop pre-made so that when I'm mixing it I don't have to kind of think about it. But then when you're going back to back with someone and there's a pre-made loop and they didn't expect it, then they're going to connect, it's going to happen, and they're going to look at you and they're going to be angry. But for me, it just kind of gives me a way to get in and out of records quickly, because I don't often get to the end of the records. And it kind of I just enjoy having my hands busy, and I kind of like the way I listen to music, especially if there's vocal elements in it or there's different ways the percussion changes. It's just for me finding the moment that I can best mix it, and sometimes a loop just kind of helps me get there quicker without kind of just keep on trying. So the other way that I like to do loops is sometimes to use the slip. The difference is that it's not always, because you're doing it so manually, sometimes it doesn't always work. But sometimes I think when you're DJing, it's nice to try stuff. And I think the DJs that I always admire are the ones that are kind of bold enough to try something, even if it doesn't work. Because at one moment when it does work, it's just the crowd kind of erupts, and you just get a whole new kind of perspective and a love for them and the way that they DJ. So this is kind of how I would use the slip. Represent for me, it prepared me in ways that I couldn't even thank them enough, because in radio people talk about this thing called air miles, and that's you're driving, anyone can pass their driving test, but your actual experience comes with the miles that you put in on the road. And it's the same for radio. So Represent Radio, they gave me my air miles, so I did a drive, they offered me a drive time slot, they paid for my travel at the time, and that's when I was about 19, 20, and I did 5 days a week. It was a 2-hour show, and I think that for me was I was just able to try so many different things and really work out what I liked. I kind of during that process realised that okay, I don't want to be a daytime DJ, kind of actually what I do want to do is something more specialist, and they kind of gave me free rein to do whatever I wanted with those 10 hours a week. I don't think there can be like a better DJ feeling when you find like two genres that are different that can work together. Because it's like, they shouldn't work, but they do. And sometimes I find that when you're DJing and you've been DJing like a 3-hour set, you get to a point in the night where you literally think that you can DJ anything. It doesn't matter, like you look up, you're like, okay, you want this one? Yeah, all right, it's coming in. And somehow magically it works and you can't recreate it. I think you just kind of gotta be in the moment and feel it. And there are some mixes then that I would actually like try and recreate, and I'm like, okay, they do work. So I might have like my staple little moments in the set where I can actually like use those two blends that I know work of two different genres to kind of take me into a different direction. So here's something that I came up with the other day. When you are trying to go from genre to genre, it's just like finding the pockets in the music and finding maybe records like this BAMS record. Even though it's quite high energy, there are a lot of pockets where you can fit things in, and that's kind of what I would always do is just try and find pockets in the music. So if it's like a rap record, I know that I can probably bring in something more percussive, and again, if you've got an instrumental record, then you can play around with bringing vocals in. So the way that I prepare my DJ sets and my radio sets are completely different. Like they kind of don't actually exist as one. So the radio is kind of like the side of me that is the chilled side, the down-tempo side. I don't actually DJ on the radio because I just find mixing R&B really boring. And there's so many different tempos. It's, I want to play so much in those 2 hours. If I thought about mixing them, half of the records wouldn't make it, and I think I'd just be trying to fit things together for the sake of it. So for the radio, I kind of think of it like methodically, kind of like a journey. The first kind of hour of radio is kind of like the introductory. It's a bit warm. It's songs that you don't know, but it sounds familiar. Second hour, is a lot more experimental. So kind of like the more indie, the more alternative soul, the more jazz stuff. And then like the last sort of half hour is kind of where I might bring some of that electronic music in. Not necessarily club stuff, just some of the more weirder electronic stuff that I like. With the DJ sets, I think I just love playing like high energy, impactful music. Like I love to dance when I'm on the dance floor, so I kind of want to make other people feel that way. So I like to use a lot of effects. I think of this as like my piano or my instrument, and everything does everything differently for me. So the effects that I use a lot of spiral, and I like spiral on the 3/4 setting, only on the 3/4 setting. I used to use ping pong, but it depends what vocal tracks I'm playing. Echo feels a little bit harsh for me, so I kind of steer clear of echo. I do like filter, and I like to use the filter on this side, not necessarily the filter on the silver buttons. I just think it's a bit more of a softer one, and I can kind of control it a little bit more, and I normally have it on the 4. Here's like basically like an example of a song that I want to play. It's a party pleaser, but I don't want to play the whole track. because it's quite a long track, and I feel like sometimes once people have had the chorus and they get a little bit bored. I think looking back on how I grew up and the music that I play now, I don't think I really at first connected the dots. I only think it's now that I'm older and I realise kind of where all that comes in, because the first kind of raves that we could go to were very dancehall driven raves, because you could get into them when you were like 14. So we were raving since then, but it was all dancehall music, and I think that definitely does have come up in my sets quite a lot, that kind of bashy sound, and definitely having the kind of UK dancehall elements kind of at a 130 BPM. And then I also think as well, like when I was 18, like funky house was huge, and that was the first time I could legally rave, so everybody was going to those raves. And again, that's the kind of music that comes back up in my sets a lot. And when I think about like being younger and stuff like that as like a kid, that definitely comes through in the radio. I loved like R&B, and my dad loved, you know, R&B and New Jack Swing and things like that. And then my mom loved like, and my stepdad loved like, you know, Radio X or alternative music. If you ever came to our house, it's all music. It's all swapping CDs. It was recording stuff. It was all, even now it's who can hold the aux or who wants to play the next record. And I think that's definitely where I've taken it from. I feel there's so much that you can do with all of these different buttons, and you can learn stuff every day. Like all the time I'm learning stuff like, oh, I didn't know that did that. So I think just being curious and just having a play around can kind of really take your mixing to somewhere else.